How you doing it? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf 15, Daf Tezvav, Daf 15 of Masechta Avodah Zarah. Friends, Daf 15 talks about the ins and outs of selling animals to pagans. What kinds of animals can be sold? Which kinds of animals can't be sold? Why yes? Why no? What are we concerned about? Chaver, join me as we explore Daf 15 of Masechta. What Masechta is this? Avodah Zarah. All right, there we go. We're going to start on Daf Yudalad Amid Beis at the Mishnah, about 10-15 lines from the bottom. It says the Mishnah, Magam Shanagu Limkor Beimadaka Le'ovdei Kachavim Mochrin. Magam Shanagu Shalo Limkor Ein Mochrin. V'chomak Me Mochrin Beimagasa. Agalim Siachim Shalom B'Shvur. B'Yudah Mata B'Shvur. V'Beser Mata B'Sus. What do you think? Let's read it again. Says the Mishnah, Malkum Shanagu, from the beginning of the Mishnah, Limkor Beimadaka of the Kavim Mochin. So in a place where the minig is that we can sell behemadaka, so who can give me an example of a behemadaka? A sheep, for example, that's a behemadaka. Who can give me an example of behemagasa? A big animal? A cow. So where the minig is to sell sheep to Ovdei Kachavim, Gesundheit. However, if the minig is not to, so we don't. What's the concern? Why not? Anybody have any ideas? What would be the reason why in certain places they wouldn't sell a behemadaka to in Ovdei Kachavim? So as my chavrusa Yosef Goodman Levitt and I, we learned Masechta Avodah Zarah about 8 years ago. And mamish 8 years ago. And we referred to this as marrying the animal, if you get what I mean. That sometimes the Ovid Kochovim, they would marry the animal. Have bia with the animal. And that's discouraged because it's a rayis is a shev mitzvahs b'nei noach. So therefore, if the minig was that we don't sell behemadakas to the Ovdei Kochavim in this place, because we're concerned about human-animal relationships, so then we don't sell behemadakas in those places. If the minig is that we do sell in those places, so we do sell. Now, the Gemara is going to talk a little bit more about this and what the concerns may or may not be, but that's the gist of it. So again, Malkum Shanagu Limkor Behemadaka Levdei Kachavim. So if the minig of a certain place is that we do sell behemadakas like sheep and goats and things to Ovdei Kachavim, so givaldik mochen, we sell to them. If the minig is, however, that in a certain place we don't sell behemadakas to Ovdei Kachavim, so then we don't. But in any place, this is not dependent on any minig. This is simply the halacha v'lo plug. Ein mochin loim behemagasa agol misyachim shleimun isfun. We don't sell them larger animals, like cows, for example, right? And even agolim, even calves, or syachim, foals. Who can tell me what a foal is? Who knows what a foal is? I think a foal is like a young horse, I think both boys and girls. By the way, do you refer to animals as boys and girls, or is that like a human thing? I don't know. Anyways, whether they are healthy, whole, or broken, it doesn't matter. We don't sell behema gasas at all. The Gemara is going to talk about why. The Gemara is going to talk about why not, but I'll also tell you why not. The reason why not is because we're concerned that the Oved Kachavim is going to use the behema gasa to work his field on Shabbos, right? That like a cow, for example, a cow is used, right, as we know, and as we're going to talk about later, a plow cow. There's plow cows and chow cows, as we know. But cows are used, to help out in the field. This was before they had, tractors and those kinds of things. So now, okay, you might think, okay, so what? So why can't I sell a cow to an Ovid Kochavim, and now it's his, and why let him do whatever he wants with it on whatever day of the week? Okay, we're going to get there. But anyways, okay, I was going to get into more detail. Fine, okay, Rabbi Yehuda Matir b'shvur. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, however, says, look, if it's a broken animal that can't be worked, so Rabbi Yehuda says, who cares? You could sell it to the Ovid Kochavim, but Meseir Matir b'sus. But Meseir says that you can sell them a horse. We're going to get to that, I think tomorrow. I think. But anyways, the gist for that is, we're going to talk about it a little bit more, I think, tomorrow. But the gist there is, so Ben Becerra says that you can, it's tomorrow, I think. Ben Becerra says that you could sell them a horse, because a horse, anyways, what do you do with it? You ride it. Even if you're going to ride it on Shabbos, it's only a Shavuos, it's midrabanan. Anyway, so there's no issue so it would be okay, according to Ben Becerra, to sell them a horse. Okay. Says the Gemara. Remember the Isura Leka Minhaga Hu de Ika, Eicha Denoig Isur Nog, Eicha Denoig Eter Nog, fragt the Gemara. That based on our Mishnah, it sounds that when it comes to Behema Daka, like a sheep, it's the minig. If the minig in a certain place is we do sell sheep to Ovdei Kochavim, I'm just going to use sheep as a reference to Behema Daka, just so that we have like an actual animal to work with. It could also be goats. And for Behema Gasa, I use a cow. I think we'll just have one thing to work with. Sheep are small, cows are big. So our Mishnah would have you think that it's all based on minig. If the minig is we sell sheep to Ovdei Kochavim in this place, so sell sheep. If the minig is we don't sell sheep to Ovdei Kochavim in a particular place, so we don't. However, frankly, Gemara, it's not a minig thing. It's completely osir, because we're concerned about the marriage issue. Remember the Isura, I'm going to read it again. Remember the Isura Leka Minhaga Hudeika. Are you saying that it's not the issue with selling sheep to the Kochavim? The issue is not that it's just blanketly osir. It's simply a minig thing. If the minig is that we don't sell the sheep, so of the Kochavim, then we don't. No. And if the minig is that it's permitted to sell sheep to of the Kochavim, so then it's permitted. But for a minute, we have a contradiction. Ein my midin behema befundiko shel of the Kochavim mipnei shechshudin al arvia. But we have a braise that says that we don't give, right? A yid doesn't give his sheep to an Oved Kochavim, like to watch it, Keilum. I think, what's a pundik? A pundik is, I don't know, some place where they have animals, I guess. Right? And so you're not, like, don't leave your sheep, a yid shouldn't leave his sheep with an Oved Kochavim, because there's a concern for a revia, for marriage. They were concerned that if you leave your sheep with an Oved Kochavim, he's going to marry it. And therefore, we don't do it. And it sounds like that's a blanket isser. Pashit, you're not allowed to do it. It's not like where the minig is, you could do it. Where the minig is not, then you don't. No, it says pashit, you don't give the sheep to an Oved Kochavim to watch, because because there's an issue of marriage there. So says the Gemara, and let's just take a step back for a second. What's the problem with selling a sheep to an Oved Kochavim? Okay, so we're saying that he might marry it. I don't think I said this yet. Then he might marry it. So what? It's his. You sold it to him. Let him do whatever the heck he wants. Okay, it's gross, but like, it's his, right? Well, the thing is, I think, did I mention this earlier? Right? Because I talked about it. It's a Shev Mitzvah's been enough. They're not allowed to do it. So we don't want to set them up for failure. We don't want to put a stumbling block in front of them, right? We don't want to give them a sheep, and now they're going to have, they're going to marry the sheep. If you don't sell the sheep, they won't marry it. So therefore, it's by selling the sheep to Oved Chacham, it could be lifnei Eivah l'siti mishlo. So and for the Gemara, Amarav says Rav, Makom she'itiru limkor, heitiru liyachid. So here's the thing. It says Rav, look, everything just depends on the place, okay? Even that brisa where it sounded like it was a blanket statement that you can't give your sheep to an Oved Chacham, to watch or whatever. That also depends. Depends where it is. That brisa is talking about in a place where there's a concern for marriage with the Oved Chacham. However, what does Rav say? Amar Rav, Makom she'itiru limkor, a place where they say it's mutter to sell, for a yid to sell a sheep to an Oved Kochavim, because there's no concern about marriage. So then there's also no, so whether you're selling it, whether you're just giving it to him to watch or whatever, makes no difference. There's no concern about marriage in this place. And the inverse is also true. Makom she'asu liyachid asu limkor. And in a place where, like our brisa says, a yid cannot give a sheep to an Oved Kochavim to watch, because we're concerned about the marriage over there. So then in that place also you'd be unable to sell. You'd be unable to sell, because that place there we have to be concerned about marriage. Rab Elazar disagrees with Rav, and he says, no, look, that brisa was blanket. That brisa didn't make any distinctions. What did the brisa say? I'm going to back up a few lines. Ein ma'amidin be'ema b'fun dekol shel Kochavim v'shakshon alaviyah. Full stop. It's not location dependent. So therefore, Rabbi Elazar says, Rabbi Elazar, af makom she'asu liyachid mutter limkor. Says Rabbi Elazar, look, it's always aser, right? Yichud is going to be aser with an Oved Kochavim, right? I can't give my sheep to an Oved Kochavim, without selling it to him, but just giving it to him to watch or whatever. Now he's going to be alone with my sheep. That is going to be a problem. As the brisa says, v'lo plug, there's no, but that's not allowed. A yid can't give his sheep to an Oved Kochavim, to watch it or whatever, because he's going to marry it. But in terms of selling, then that is location dependent. My time outcome selling would be location dependent. The reason is well, an Oved Kochavim cares about his animals, that they should not be barren, right? He's going to want his animals to be able to have offspring for him. And if he marries the animal, apparently it won't be able to have babies anymore. So therefore, there is a distinction between selling and, giving it to him to watch. If you're just giving him to watch, he doesn't really care about it. It's not his, it's yours. So he's going to marry it. And therefore, it's always going to be aser. However, if you sell it to him, well, once it's his, he doesn't want to make it barren, so he won't marry it. And therefore, you could sell it to Oved Kochavim. If the minhag in a certain places, we don't sell to Oved Kochavim, so then we don't sell to Oved Kochavim, but that's already a location-dependent thing. Whereas when you're not selling it, you're just giving it, to watch, so then that's going to be a problem, because he's going to marry the sheep. V'av Rav Hadarbe, and actually Rav even changed his mind. He agrees actually with Rabbi Elazar. The Amr of Tachlifa, Amr of Shila bar Avimi, Mishmei de Rav, Oved Kochavim chasal be'emto shelo te'akar. Then Oved Kochavim, cares about his animal, that it should not be barren, and therefore he's going to refrain from marrying it. Okay, where are we? Okay, let me drink a stick of water. I have a little water here, which is nice. I usually have water with me when I'm recording. Taka, it's a nice thing. Okay. Now, the Mishnah had said that we never sell a behema gasa to an oved koichavim, and that's no matter what. Let's talk about it. My time. How come? Okay, so there's no concern about marriage when it comes to a cow. The concern is that the oved koichavim might work the cow on Shabbos. That if a yid sells his cow to an oved koichavim, the oved koichavim might put the cow to work on Shabbos. Vinyavid, who cares? Let the cow do melacha on Shabbos. It's not the yid's anymore. Kim de zabna, kanyo. Once the yid sold it to oved koichavim, it belongs to oved koichavim. Let him do whatever he wants with it. And for the Gemara, you're right when it comes to selling. But we have to be concerned, what about when the yid lends it to the oved koichavim? What about when the yid rents it out to the oved koichavim? In that case, the yid retains ownership of the cow, and it would be a problem for the oved koichavim to work the cow on Shabbos. And therefore, we say, don't sell a cow to an oved koichavim, even though technically selling it should be okay, but out of concern for, we really, if you allow people to sell it, then they might end up lending it out, renting it out, and that would be a problem because it still belongs to the yid and it could be put to work on Shabbos. Wow, what's that noise? A truck, that's what it is. Fine. Where am I? But the Gemara has an interesting shaila. The Gemara has an interesting shaila, which it ultimately rejects. It has an interesting question. She'ela kanye v'aga kanye. The Gemara says, wait, but if the oved koichavim is borrowing the cow or is renting the cow, he should acquire it. He would be konit when he rents it or when he borrows it. And therefore, if he acquires the cow, well then, back to the question of like, well, if it's his, then he can do whatever he wants with it, whenever he wants with it. And the Gemara accepts that for now. Rather says Rami Breder Yeva that the concern is about testing it out. What does that mean, testing it out? Well, sometimes what could happen is the deal goes down right before Shabbos. The yid sells his cow to the oved koichavim right before Shabbos, and the oved koichavim says, wait, let's just test it out first with a load. I want to see how it carries a load, so that I could to confirm that this is really a cow that it would like to purchase. And the oved koichavim says, come, let's test it out. V'shama lekale v'ozla machmosei v'nichale detezel v'avdel mechamech b'em t'b'shabes v'mechabech b'em t'b'shabes chatas. The concern, we'll read that again in a second, but the concern is that the yid is going to sell his cow to an oved koichavim mamish as Shabbos is coming in. The oved koichavim is going to say, wait, let's test it out and see how it carries a load. And then, okay, and what's the yid going to do? The yid is going to, call out to the cow. Basically, the cow recognizes the voice of its owner, who's currently the yid. And the yid is going to say, all right, cowy cow, kimaran. And it's going to start, walking with its load on Shabbos. And that, of course, would be a problem. So therefore, we're saying, there's no concern for the yid selling the animal to a oved koichavim, because then it belongs to oved koichavim, can do whatever he wants with it. Same would be the case for lending for renting out. But we are concerned about this scenario, that if the Yid sells the cow to the Oved Kochavim as Shabbos is coming in, and then the Yid might end up kind of, testing it out with the Oved Kochavim as Shabbos is coming in, and the cow is going to be kind of walking with a load based on the owner's, the Yid's voice, and it'll be like he's basically walking a cow bearing a load on Shabbos. I'm going to read that again. Backed up like 4 or 5 lines, right? That sometimes the that the Yid might be selling the cow to the Kochavim as Shabbos is coming in. And the Oved Kochavim will say, "Come, let's test it out with a load to see how it works." Then the Yid is going to call out to his cow so that it should move and walk. And the cow is going to listen to his voice, and the cow is going to move because of the voice of the Yid. And it will be beneficial for the Yid, right? It's beneficial for the Yid that the cow is walking, carrying the load on Shabbos, because that way he can make the sale. Which would be guiding one's animal with a burden on Shabbos. And somebody who does that on Shabbos is going to be chayiv a korban chatas. So we want to prevent that scenario. So to prevent that scenario, we say no selling cows to Ovdei Kochav. Maskif la Rav Shisha Brei de Rav Idi. Rav Shisha Brei de Rav Idi asked the following question. Now we had said that if a Yid rents out his cow to an Oved Kochavim, so the Oved Kochavim will be koneh, he will acquire the cow, right? When he rents it, he will acquire it, and therefore, if he wants to work the cow on Shabbos, he can. He's acquired it. But is that really the case? Again, Maskef Rav Shisha Brei de Rav Idi, Rav Shisha Brei de Rav Idi asks, Uschiris mikanyer? Does renting out really make a kinyan? Would the Oved Kochavim really be koneh when he's renting it? We learn in the Mishnah, that when we say, and we're going to learn, there's a Mishnah that we're going to get to in a few days, on Daf Chaf Aleph, that even when we said that you could rent out, that you could rent out an apartment, a dira, a property to an Oved Kochavim, lo lebeis dira amru, you can't rent out a property to an Oved Kochavim to live in, because then he's going to bring his getchkas into there. So you can't give it. You can give it to him. You can rent it out to him as like a storage space to store things there, as a storage unit, but not to live. Because if you rent out a space to an Oved Kochavim to live, he's going to bring in his getchkas, and that's a problem. Now, but if we had said earlier, that renting out actually makes a kinyan, if that's the case, then it belongs to the Oved Kochavim. Let him do whatever he wants in there. But if that's the case, then when the Oved Kochavim is bringing the getchkis, he's bringing it into his own house. He rented it. He owns it. He's koneh it. So therefore, from the fact that we're saying that he's not allowed to, right, you're not allowed to rent out a space to an Oved Kochavim because we're concerned, hey, he's going to bring his getchkas in there. It sounds like it does not belong to the Oved Kochavim. It still belongs to the Yid, and he has to make sure that there's no getchkas in there. And for the Gemara, shayni avodas Kochavim dichamira. No, you could say that the Oved Kochavim would be koneh the property. However, when it comes to Avodah Zarah, we are particularly stringent. Dichsib leisavi te'eva el beisecha. The pasuk says, "Don't bring abominations into your home," and we say that will apply even if you had rented it out to an Oved Kochavim, and technically he's koneh, but still we don't want any getchkis in there. Maskef Rav Yitzchak Brei of Misharsha. But then Rav Yitzchak Ber Mashasha also asked the question, Schiras Mikanya, is renting out really going to make a kinyan? That if the Oved Chacham rents out the cow, then it would be his. But V'atznam, we learn in the Mishnah, this is in Trumas, but it was quoted from Yevamis. Yisrael shesacher par mikoim. If a Yisrael rents a cow from a kohen, Yachileno karshine truma. The Yid can feed the cow of the priest truma vetch. You hear this? The kohen shesacher par Yisrael, and if it's fakert, if it's a priest who rents a cow from Yisrael, even though the priest is responsible to feed the cow, lo yachilena karshine truma. He cannot feed the cow truma vetch. Vetch, I think, is some kind of animal food. So what's going on here? What's going on here is that a Yisrael, of course, is not allowed to eat truma. He has to give it to a kohen. Now, a kohen could feed the truma to his cow. That's no problem. So now, interestingly, when it comes to truma, right, truma doesn't belong to any one particular kohen, right? So if Yisrael has truma, he can give it to any kohen that he wants, right? So we're saying that if a Yisrael rents a cow from a kohen, so it's a cow that belongs to the kohen, which is kind of part of the point over here, right? Is that we're saying even though the Yisrael rents it from the kohen, and the Yisrael is responsible to feed it, but it still belongs to the kohen. And we're saying that now a kohen is allowed to feed truma to his animal. So we're saying that if a Yisrael is renting a cow from a kohen, and it's the kohen's cow, and the Yisrael has truma, he could feed that truma to the cow that he's renting from the kohen. And the kohen can't say, wait, I want the truma. No, because the Yisrael says, look, I don't have to give you the truma. I can give the truma to some other kohen. He's talking to any kohen he wants, and therefore, the kohen who he's renting from has no claim hey, I want the truma, because Yisrael could say, I don't need to give it to you. So that being the case, and that being the case that the kohen can't say, I want the truma, well, that being the case, he would be happy if the Yisrael uses the truma instead of giving it to some other kohen. He'd be happy if he uses it to feed his own animal, because that way, he'll feed it by Yofek. If the Yisrael was responsible to feed the cow. So, he's going to spend as little as possible, he's going to spend the least amount of money that he can to feed the cow. But here he has this truma that he's got to do something with. The kohen would be very happy if the Yisrael feeds it to the cow. Feed it by Yofek, give whatever truma he has. So the kohen would be happy with that. Now, if it's vice versa, if the kohen is renting a cow from a Yisrael, and the cow belongs to the Yisrael, so the kohen cannot feed this cow truma. So what do we see in this brisa, in this Mishnah? What we see is that even when someone is renting, he doesn't own it, right? So if the Yisrael is renting the cow from the kohen, and even though the Yisrael, it's his responsibility, it's Yisrael's responsibility to feed the cow, but still, it isn't his cow, it's the kohen's cow, and therefore he's allowed to feed it truma. And also, the kohen who's renting from the Yisrael is not going to be allowed to feed the cow truma because the cow belongs to the Yisrael. So again, V'atnan, we learn in the Mishnah, Yisrael shesacher par mikohen, a Yisrael who rented a cow from a kohen, Yachileno karshine truma, he could feed it truma vetch. V'kohen shesacher par Yisrael, and the opposite, a kohen who rents a cow from a Yisrael, Afal pisham zonosel olav, even though the kohen is responsible to feed the cow, lo yachilena karshine truma, the kohen cannot feed the cow truma vetch. V'sagadadich schirus kanya, and if it enters your mind that schirus makes a kinyan, and therefore the kohen, if we're going to say that when the kohen rents the cow from the Yisrael, he's kona the cow, amay lo yachilena, why is the kohen prohibited from feeding the cow vetch, if a truma vetch, if he was konet party day, it would be considered his cow. So rather we see that a rental does not make a kinyan. A rental does not make a kinyan, and therefore going back to our original havamina, which was, well, really the original question, which is why is a yid prohibited from selling a cow to Oved Kochavim? Because we're concerned that while selling is no problem about working on Shabbos because it belongs to Oved Kochavim, but if the yid rents a cow to an Oved Kochavim or lends a cow to an Oved Kochavim, or also tests it out with Oved Kochavim right before Shabbos, in all of these scenarios, the cow would still belong to the yid at that point, and we would have to be concerned about doing malacha, that cow doing malacha on Shabbos. So Elish Mamina Schir is low kindness. We see that renting is not kona. Behasha de Omar Schir is lekanya. And now that we say that renting is not kona, and therefore if an Oved Kochavim is renting a cow, it does not belong to Oved Kochavim, it still belongs to the yid. Gzerim mishum schiris v'gzerim mishum she'ela v'gzerim mishum nisyoni. So therefore, why can't we sell a cow to an Oved Kochavim? Because even though in that case the Oved Kochavim would own it and he could work it whatever day he wants, but it's a gezerah out of concern when it's rented to the Oved Kochavim, or when it is lended to the Oved Kochavim, or when it is tested with the Oved Kochavim right before Shabbos. Those are scenarios that we are concerned about, because in those cases it still belongs to the Yid. Rav Ada, Shor Lizabune Chamra, Aida the Safsira. Rav Ada permitted a Yid to sell a donkey to an Oved Kochavim by way of a broker. Okay? By way of a broker. But we had just said that a Yid cannot sell a cow, or in this case we're talking about a donkey. I guess it's also considered a Be'em Agasa. So Rav Ada allowed a Yid, so we had just said that a Yid cannot sell a Behema Gasa, whether a cow, whether a donkey. Let's talk about a donkey now, because that's what we're talking about. A Yid would not be allowed to sell a donkey directly to an Oved Kochavim, because we're concerned that he might work the donkey on Shabbos. And we're concerned about a situation of Schirus, or She'ela, or Nisyone. However, that concern goes away if the Yid is selling it to the Oved Kochavim via a broker, even if the broker is Jewish. How come? Imishum nisyone, because if we're concerned about testing it out, we said, how does the test work? The test works that you put a burden on the animal, and then the owner, whose voice the animal recognizes, says, all right, come over here, buddy. And the animal goes over there. So, but if we're talking about a broker can't do that. The animal doesn't recognize the voice of the broker. So nisyone is not a concern. V'imishum she'ela v'schirus, and if we're concerned about, well, maybe the animal is going to be lent to the Oved Kochavim or rented out to Oved Kochavim. Brokers are not interested in lending things or renting things out. Brokers are interested in finding a buyer, selling it, making a profit, and moving on to the next item. Right? Since the donkey does not belong to the broker, lo moshil is not lending it out to anybody. Lo moger is not renting it out to anybody. He just wants to get it off his hands, a final sale, ASAP. Also, he doesn't want to lend it or rent it out because he doesn't want to find out that there's some kind of a mum there. The broker is interested in input and output. He's interested in getting the donkey to sell and getting it off of his hands as quickly as possible. So therefore, when the sale is happening via a broker, we can assume that it is going to he's going to sell it. He's not going to rent it out. He's not going to lend it out. He can't test it because the animal doesn't recognize his voice. The only thing that can happen in practice is that it will be sold. And if it's going to be sold to the Ovei Kochavim, so it belongs to the Ovei Kochavim, and there's no concern in practice about the animal working on Shabbos. Okay. Now we get into an interesting section, which is gonna take us, I think, for a while. I can't remember. But basically, there's an interesting section here about. Should I introduce it? Yeah, it's kind of an interesting section that basically, if there is some reason why you can assume that actually the animal is not going to do any asur melacha, well, then we can say that's good enough. So let's go. Yeah, that's why I was debating if I should explain it, because I think it might be helpful if we just look at it inside. Okay. Rav Huna Zavin ha'ipar lo v'kucham. Here you go. Rav Huna sold a cow to an v'kucham. Boom. There you go. The question is, everyone's probably thinking like, wait, this makes no sense. We had just said that a yid is not allowed to sell a cow to an ovei kochavim, and we're seeing now that Rav Huna did sell a cow to an ovei kochavim. So now it's a little bit interesting, right? Because it's like, okay, so it seems like there is actually some kind of scenario where you actually can sell a cow to an ovei kochavim. So Rav Huna zavin ha'ipare lo ovei kochavim. Rav Huna sold a cow to an ovei kochavim. Amalei Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda says to Rav Huna, what's going on? My time over my ochi. How come you did this? Amalei, Rav Huna replied, Eimor le'shchita zabna. It's a chow cow. Plow cow, chow cow. We remember that, right? I don't. When's that from? Can't remember. When was that from? Maybe it was from Sanhedrin, maybe. Chow cow, plow cow. I think. Maybe Marcus. Anyways. So the thing is, right, a chow cow, of course, is to slaughter, to eat. A plow cow is to work in the field. So everyone says, well, I sold it to him as a chow cow. He's not going to work with it. And what are you concerned? It's going to, overcomes going to put it to work on Shabbos? There's no work. That cow is food. It's a chow cow. But how do we know that we could just say that? I mean, this is a chiddush, right? Well, I could sell in a cow to the ovei kochavim and just say like, oh, I sold it as a chow cow, leave me alone. So how do we know that now how do we know this? It's not. How do we know we could say it? It's not as we learned in the Mishnah. So it says Adam. I'm going to switch Adam, and I think also in one of the places with lo, I think it reads a little better. So this is talking about a scenario where it's Shemitah, okay? And of course, on Shemitah, you're not allowed to work the field, right? The field needs to rest. Now here you have a guy, let's call him Ruvain. Okay, Ruvain, he doesn't take Shemitah so seriously. He's a bit shady when it comes to Shemitah. We can't really trust him. We have to be concerned that if you sell, you have to concern that if Shimon sells his cow to Reuven, who's shady when it comes to Shemitah, we're concerned that maybe he's going to work the land. He's going to use it to work the land on Shemitah, which is a problem. So, Beishamar says, "Beishamar lo yimkor lo parach oreshes b'shvius." Don't sell Reuven a plow cow on Shemitah, because we have to be concerned he's going to plow with the cow. Beisila says, no, you could sell him the cow on Shemitah because theoretically he could use it as a chow cow. Theoretically he could simply eat it. And therefore no problem, you could sell him the cow. So we see that just like in this Mishnah from Shvius, we're saying that Shimon can sell, according to Beis Hillel, who of course we paskin like, Shimon can sell a cow to Ruvain, who's a bit shady when it comes to Shemitah, because Shimon says, I'm selling it to him as a chow cow. So we see that, you could say that, and therefore Rav Huna as well, when Rav Huna sells his cow to the Ovei Kachavim, he says, look, it's a chow cow, it's not a plow cow. But Amar Rabba says, wait, those two cases are different. Because on Shabbos, I have a mitzvah that my cow needs to rest on Shabbos. And therefore, okay, my cow needs to rest on Shabbos. But on Shemitah, there's no mitzvah that my cow needs to rest on Shemitah. I can't work the land. The land has to be left alone. I don't have like a specific mitzvah to let my cow rest on Shemitah. And therefore, therefore Rabbi says I can argue that we can be lenient when it comes to Shimon selling his cow to Ruvain on Shemitah, because even if Ruvain does work with it on Shemitah, the cow itself, there's no like isser with the cow, the fact that the cow is doing work. There's issues that the land needs to rest. But I'm not responsible to make sure that my cow rests on Shemitah, which is not the case when it comes to Shabbos. My cow needs to rest on Shabbos, and therefore, maybe it would be more stringent when it comes to selling a cow to Ovei Kachavim, where the concern is that it might be worked on Shabbos. But Amar Rabba says, Rabba Midami, are those two cases analogous? Rav Huna selling his cow to Ovei Kachavim and Shimon selling his cow to Ruvain on Shemitah? Also, when it comes to Shemitah, Eino de Mitzuve al Shvisas be'emto b'Shvias. A person is not commanded to make sure that his cow rests on Shemitah. But also, when it comes to selling a cow to Ovei Kachavim, where he might put it to work on Shabbos, or the Mitzuve al Shvisas be'emto b'Shabbos, a person is commanded that his cow needs to rest, that his animal needs to rest on Shabbos. Therefore, I can argue Rav Huna can't sell his cow to an Ovei Kachavim out of concern that for cases of rentals and borrowings, where I have a mitzvah to make sure that my cow doesn't work on Shabbos, that it rests on Shabbos. Omle Abaye, but Abaye pushes back and he says, "V'cholecha de adam mitzuve aser." And what, wherever a person is commanded that something needs to rest, then it becomes aser to sell. But varei sode, what about the field? What if Shimon isn't selling Reuven on Shemitah his cow, but rather his field? Varei sode the adam mitzuva al shvisa sadeyu. A yid is commanded that his land needs to rest on Shemitah. V'ashvius on Shemitah v'tanya, we learn in a braise. B'shama lo yimkor lo stay near b'ashvius. B'shama says, Shimon cannot sell Reuven a plowed field on Shemitah, because we're concerned that Reuven's going to, work the land. He's going to seed it. Basil says, no, it's okay, because you could always leave it fallow and not work it. So here we have a scenario where Shimon has where the field itself needs to rest, and yet Basil is saying that Shimon can sell it to Reuven, because you say, well, Reuven can leave it fallow. And if that's the case, then you could make the argument that Rav Huna did the right thing, that he could sell his cow to an Ovei Kachavim, even though a yid has a requirement to make sure that his cow rests on Shabbos. But as long as you could come up with a reason, which is, well, I'm selling it as a chow cow, then it's okay. Rav Ashi has the kash v'cholecha to ein adam mitzuva shari, and what? And in a scenario where, right, because we had said that when it comes to Shemitah, right, our logic, we'd entertain the approach, the perspective that Shimon was allowed to sell his cow to Reuven on Shemitah because there's no requirement for his cow to rest on Shemitah. But is that really like the way things work? Is that like how we think about things? What if I can give you a scenario, as we're about to see, where there's no requirement to make sure that like your tools rest on Shemitah, for example, and yet you're not allowed to sell those? The ain't of the mitzvah, what? Just because a person is not commanded, Shari would be permitted by Kalim. What about like a hoe, for example? Can Shimon sell Reuven a hoe during Shemitah? There's no requirement for my hoe to rest during Shemitah, and yet we say it's not allowed. The ein adam mitzvah shvisas kelim. A person is not commanded that your tools need to rest during Shemitah, and yet b'shvias on Shemitah v'tnan we learn in Mishnah elu ein kelim she'ein adam rasha lemochim b'shvias. These things Shimon would not be allowed to sell to Reuven on Shemitah. Hamachresha, a plow, v'chol kileh, and all of its vessels are all a yoke, v'amizareh, I think a winnower, v'adeker, I think that's a hoe. So we see that even though Shimon is not commanded to make sure that his tools rest on Shemitah, and yet he's not allowed to sell these things. El Omer Rashi, rather says Rav Ashi, look, here's the deciding factor. Look, if we could come up with a plausible argument to say that we don't need to be concerned, then we can make such an argument. Even though you're commanded. So therefore, yes, Rav Huna has a commandment to make sure that his animal rests on Shabbos. But if he can make the argument that he sold it as a chow cow, that is valid. Right? The same thing with Shimon selling his cow to Reuven on Shemitah, because again, he could say I sold it as a chow cow. And also, Shimon selling his field to Reuven on Shemitah, because he could say Reuven can leave it fallow. But those are all plausible things. Right? And the mitzvah, even though in the case of the cow on Shabbos and the field on Shemitah, he's commanded to make sure that they rest. But still, if there is a plausible argument to be made that there's no problem happening here, for example, it's a chow cow or the field could be left fallow, so then that's fine. But but if there isn't really a plausible argument to be made, so then it's going to be osur, even though there's no mitzvah. For example, the hoe. Shimon's not allowed to sell a hoe to Reuven on Shemitah, even though there's no requirement for the hoe to rest on Shemitah, because the thing is, there's no plausible reason why Reuven would be buying this hoe on Shemitah, if not for the fact that he wants to use it on Shemitah. A hoe is a commodity. You could buy it any time. Buy it now, buy it in a year from now. It makes no difference. They can have hoes in a year from now. Land is a different story. Or a cow that you want to eat right now is a different story. But there is no reason why Reuven needs to buy this hoe now on Shemitah when you're not allowed to work the land. Wait till after Shemitah. There will be plenty of hoes in the hoe store. So therefore, in that case, even though there's no requirement to make sure your hoe rests on Shemitah, nonetheless, you can't sell it because, there's no real argument. There's no, plausible, credible argument to be made. Why Reuven would want this tool if not to use it on Shemitah. Rabba Zovin Ahu Chamra L'Yisrael. Rabba sold a donkey, a behema gasa, to a yid who was suspected that he sells to Ovdei Kochavim. So we know that a behema gasa cannot be sold to an Oved Kochavim. So now Rabba sold a donkey. Now a donkey is not going to be a chowki. You're not going to eat it. You sold it to work. So that there would be no reason why you could sell a donkey directly to an Oved Chovim. We said by way of a broker could be okay, but not directly to Oved Chovim. And again, Rabba Zavin. So in this case, Rabba Zavin Uchameli Yisrael. So Rabba sold a donkey to a Yid. Hachoshed them kol Oved Chovim. But that Yid, we suspect, might sell the donkey on to an Oved Chovim, and that would not be allowed. So Abai says to Rabba, how come you did this? I know that you sold it to a Yid, but there's a real concern that Yid might then sell it to an Oved Chovim. Rabba says, well, I sold it to a Yid. But Abai says to Rabba, but he's going to go and sell it to an Oved Chovim, and that's not okay. So then Rabba responds, I don't understand. What? He only sells to Oved Chovim? What if a Yid wants to buy it, he won't sell it to the Yid? Kilu? It's not like I'm selling it to a Yid who is definitely going to sell it to Oved Chovim. He might sell it to Oved Chovim. Yeah, sure. He's not so trustworthy. He doesn't think twice about selling it to Oved Chovim. That's a problem. But if a Yid wants to buy it, he'll sell it to the Yid. So it's not like I'm, it's definitely going to end up with Oved Chovim. Esve. However, we have a kasha on Rabba. Mokim shenoagu limkor behema daka likusim mochrin. In a place where the minig is to sell a behema daka to kutim. Kusim are like those people who are like questionably Jewish. So if the minig is to sell a behema daka to them, no problem. Shlolem kor ein mochrin. But if the minig is that we don't sell it to them, then we don't sell it to them. My time. Now, what's the reason not to sell behema dakas to kusim? It's not for the same reason as the Oved Chovim. The Oved Chovim are concerned about marriage. That's not the case by the kutim. So what's the concern? If we're going to say that the issue with selling to kutim is the same issue with the Oved Chovim, which is marriage, are kutim really suspected of marrying sheep? No, they're not. We learn in a brisa. We don't leave a sheep with an oved kochav. We don't leave. What's a sheep? So let's say like a ram. We're going to talk about rams and ewes, I guess. Sorry, Diana. I know it's not ewe, but it is. For us, it's an ewe. So we don't leave rams with the male of the kuchavim, and we don't leave ewes with female of the kuchavim, because what happens is apparently the male of the kuchavim, they like to kind of sleep with lots of different women. Whether they're married or not, it makes no difference. And if you have like some Oved Kuchavim who goes over to the house of an Ovedes Kuchavim, because he wants to sleep with her, but she's not around, so he'll just marry the sheep. No problem. So the concern is not that the Ovedes Kuchavim is going to sleep with the ewe. The concern is that an Oved Kuchavim will come to her house to sleep with her, but she won't be there, so then he'll sleep with the ewe. And certainly you can't leave a female sheep, you can't leave an ewe with a boy Oved Kuchavim. And you can't leave rams with Ovdos Kuchavimos, because then, they could have marriage. You also can't leave an animal with their shepherds. And don't be alone with the Oved Chovim, because they might kill you. We also don't, drop off our children with them to, for cheder, that they wouldn't be their teachers. What does Rashi say? Because they can make them heretics. Also, we're considering mishkav schur, all sorts of nasty things. The lamdo umnes are to teach, I guess, the child a trade. Aval ma'amidin. Okay, now, so that was all by Ovdei Kuchavim. Nothing's allowed there. But you can leave sheep with kutim, right? Rams with the women, and ewes with the men. Certainly not rams with the men and the ewes, and certainly yes, rams with the men and ewes with the women. We're not concerned about the marriage there with the kutim. And you can give your animal to their shepherds, and you can be alone with kutim. They're not going to kill you. You could send them to their chadorim. At least, I don't know, probably not. I don't know about learning Torah. It sounds like they're not the best. But anyways, there's no problem of there's no issues of minus or anything like that, I guess. To teach a trade. So we see that there is no, we said that we can, you can leave your animal with a kusi. There's no concern about marriage. So again, getting back to, right. So we had said, well, where was the Esve? Where are we? Esve. Makom shnagu. So we had said, Makom shnagu limkor be'medaka lekusim mochun, shalimkor ein mochun. Right. So we had said that in some places a minig not to sell behema dakas to kusim. And again, the question was, why not? There's no issue of marriage there. So what's the issue? We also learned about in mochrin loim lo zayin v'lo klei zayin. We don't sell to the, I believe, the ovdei kuchavim. Yeah, we don't sell to the ovdei kuchavim weapons or klei zayin, or like handles to weapons. Ve'en mashchizin loim es hazayin. We don't sharpen their weapons for them because they can be used against us. Ve'en mochrin loim lo sadan v'lo kolarin. We don't sell them like, I think maybe those are like shackles for like feet, and not like collars, v'lo kabolim, or chains, v'lo shalshalos, shalbarzel, or other kinds of chains. Echad ovdei kuchavim ve'echad kusi. Whether an ovdei kuchavim or a kusi, my time, why? If the concern is about murder, but meaning the question is, why can't you sell weapons to a kusi? We're not concerned about murder. We had just said a few minutes ago that you can be alone with a kusi. We're not concerned that he's going to kill you. So what is the issue, right? Why can we not sell sheep to kusis? Why can we not sell weapons to the kusis? What is the concern here? We're not concerned about marrying the sheep. We're not concerned that he's going to kill you with the weapons. What is the concern? The concern with the kuti is that he's going to pass it on and sell it to an oved kocham. So we see that you're not allowed to sell, or at least in some places, right, depending on the minig, you're not allowed to sell a sheep to a kusi, because he may then, he won't definitely, but he might sell it to an oved kocham. We can't sell him weapons because he might sell it to an oved kocham. So there does seem to be a concern about maybe somebody's going to pass it on to an oved kocham. And therefore, how could Rabbah have sold a donkey to a yid who we are concerned might then pass it on to an oved kocham? Maybe you're going to say, well, kusis don't do tshuva, but the yid, we could say he'll do tshuva and he won't sell it to an oved kocham. Just like you're not allowed to sell these weapons to an oved kocham, so you're also not allowed to sell. I think it's talking about, one second. Okay, I don't know, maybe whether it's weapons, whether an animal, whatever it is, you also can't sell to you also can't sell to a yid who we'd be concerned will then sell to an oved kocham. So there is a real concern that you can't sell to a yid, as we just saw in this brisa. Oh no, that this is right, okay, in Amora. We don't sell to a yid who we're concerned might sell it on to an oved kocham. Right, parse. Rabbi then said, shoot. And he went and chased after this yid who he had sold it to, who were this donkey to, that were concerned he might sell to an oved kocham. Rabbi chased after this yid 3 parses. Or some say it was 1 parsa, but it was in sand, which is hard to run in. V'lo adarke, but no luck. Rabba could not track down the buyer. Shucks. Amr of Dimi bar Abba says of Dimi bar Abba Gederach also limkor le'ove kochavim. Kach also limkor le'listim Yisrael. Just like you're not allowed to sell weapons to ovdei kochavim, you also can't sell weapons to Yidden who are thieves. Hechidami, what are we talking about? Either chashad dekatil pshita. I know kochavim. If we're talking about a Jewish thief who is dangerous, that we're concerned he's going to kill people with these weapons, obviously we can't sell him weapons that we're concerned he's going to kill other Yidden with. It's no different than an ovei kochavim. It's the same concern. Videlo katil amaylo. And if we're not concerned that he's a killing kind of thief, so why not? He's a Yid. You can sell him weapons. Really, we're talking about a thief that we're not by default concerned that he's going to kill anybody. However, a guy who's like a sneaky kind of guy, and he sneakily kind of steals stuff. And then people could chase after him, and he might, in self-defense, actually kill other people. So therefore, it's just better, right? He might kill people when they chase after him. So therefore, therefore, don't sell weapons to thieves because they might end up harming people. We can't sell shields to ovdei kochavim. My time, how come? If it's because, well, shields will shield them. They will protect them. We don't want to protect them. Wait, did I skip something? 1 second. Talking about we don't sell them shields. Some say we do sell them shields. My time, what's the reason for the opinion that we don't sell them shields? If it's because, well, the shields will protect them. We don't want to protect them. Well, then we shouldn't sell them wheat and barley either, because that'll keep them alive. We just don't want them to have like anything good. Don't even sell them food. So Rav says, says Rav, look, if that's a possibility, if we could not sell them food, then great. The thing is, if we refuse to sell them food, then we could get into some sort of keeping the peace issues. But shields is like a different thing. Don't sell them kind of shields. So, those say trees in Hainu time of the low. There are those who say this is the reason why not to sell them shields, because the low dechi shlim zinayu katli bigavayu. Well, because the shield can also be a weapon. They run out of weapons and they can just use their shield as a weapon, and we can't sell them weapons. Those say mochrim lem treesin, we can sell them shields. Dechi shlim zinayu ma'arik arke, because what happens when they run out of weapons? They run away. So they won't use the shield as a weapon. Amr Nachman, that the locha is like the yeshom that we can sell them shields. Amr Rav Ada in Mochinlan Ashoshil Shabarzel. We don't sell them clumps of iron. My time, why not? Because they can like pound them down. If you have a clump of metal, you can make it into weapons. So we don't want to sell them clumps of metal that can be made into weapons. If that's the case, well then don't sell them like, I think, hose and like adzes. What the heck's an adze? Amr Zvid says of Zvid b'parza hindoa. Well, when we say don't sell them a clump of iron that's specifically Indian iron, which is specifically used for weapons, something that's specifically for weapons, don't sell them. And the reason why nowadays we do sell them, interesting twist. Rav Ashi the Parsoid de Meganu Ilavun. Says Rav Ashi, well, that is for the Persians. We could sell the, I guess, Indian iron nowadays because we're selling it to the Persians, and the Persians protect us. That's an interesting twist. Things have changed since then. That was Daf Tezvav of Masechet Avodah Zarah. I think it turned out to be a fairly long daf. We talked about the kinds of animals and other items that can and cannot be sold to Ovdei Kochavim. We talked about, and Kusim, to some extent, we talked about selling sheep. That selling sheep is dependent on the minig. But simply giving a sheep to be watched, that's not going to be okay because we're concerned about marriage. We talked about selling behemagasas, which could be used to work on Shabbos, and we're concerned that what about if he rents it out, or if he lends it, or even is testing it out right before Shabbos, or then if he lends it or rents it out, the Oved Chacham can use it on Shabbos. We had discussions around that. We talked about if there were that you can. However, it sounds like ultimately though you actually can sell like a cow to an Oved Chacham, because you could say, well, I'm selling it as a chow cow rather than a plow cow, but you can't do that with a donkey though. So for donkeys would not be allowed. And we talked about other scenarios where maybe even donkeys. We talked about some other interesting scenarios, for example, that you can't sell it to a yid who might then sell it to an Oved Chacham, but you can sell a donkey to an Oved Chacham by way of a broker. So we talked about some interesting scenarios over here. And Daf Tesvav Masechta Avodah Zarah. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.